Hello, everybody. My name is Vaishnavi Nashte. I'm the marketing manager here at Test Associates. Today's podcast is in collaboration with the National Software Testing Conference, and this will be held in London on the 22nd and 23rd of July. If you want to learn more about the speaker lineup and the workshop agenda, please follow the link in the description to do so. And just so you know, we are running an offer right now. You'll be able to purchase tickets at 50% off. So make sure to take advantage of that. Today on the podcast, we have Richard, who is currently a chief tech architect, but he has also been a teacher, a professor, games coder, producer, director, principal, artist, and a co-founder. Oh my gosh, Richard, that's amazing.
It just
He
happened that way accidentally.
accidentally is it?
But it's a good thing because one of the things the thing I'm sort of for once going to talk about in public, I normally talk tech,
Hmm.
but is career resilience and how I see things moving ahead because we're entering very uncertain times
Yeah.
and people who work in our industries are going to face all sorts of different problems. And I'm
Yeah.
actually a living example of how to keep
How you've
changing and to keep
yeah.
relevant and how to keep reskilling. And I've done that all my life. If we talk about that, I mean, I started a first job
Hmm.
teaching art and music in a school.
Wow. Hmm.
And my current job, which may well be my last one, you never know, is effectively a chief architect
Yeah.
in a railway company working with machine learning, standard
Hmm.
IT, all sorts of things. And all the way through, I've done new things.
Yeah.
And that staying relevant has been really, really hard work.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm reading your bio, and the word that comes sort of into my mind is like your professional journey has been quite inspiring for many, right? Obviously, resilience is another word, but yeah, you've done so much stuff. I'm genuinely curious about your journey.
Well, the journey's interesting because I see it obviously from the inside.
Yeah.
And to me, when I look back, what I see is just me being creative. Because I think I trained as a fine artist, so I'm a very, very good painter and photographer,
Yeah.
um, and a reasonable musician. And I got into tech really starting around 1990.
Which
So way
instruments do you
before.
play?
Oh,
Sorry to go
I'm
completely off
a
that.
classical guitarist, but I play rock
Nice.
guitar and jazz now, a little bit of piano.
Hmm.
Um, and I got into it because I wanted to put technology into my art. And this was
Yeah.
way back in 1990.
Hmm.
So back in those days, I had to go and learn physics, computer science. There was no software to do anything. You had to write software. And
Hmm.
I suddenly found when I had a purpose that I was actually good at maths and physics and science, and I coped with logic and coding, um, all of which I'd struggled with at school.
Hmm.
I'd
Hmm.
struggled with the sciences, so I'd gone into the arts. But I
Yeah.
think because I was focused on a creative vision and I wanted to do something interesting, it suddenly became easier because I did only the bits that I needed to do.
Yeah.
And that's stayed with me all the way through the career.
Hmm.
The ability to look at something and think, well, what out of all that ahead of me do I need or want to do? And I focus on that.
Hmm.
And I think all I've ever done throughout the entire career is make new things. When I joined a university, it was to create a new department. It
Is
was a
it?
digital arts department in the 90s. And I created two degree courses and two master's courses in 3 years and got them off the ground.
Hmm.
When I joined a tech company in 94, it was to make interactive television on analog systems. So it was using the creativity and the coding to take television
Yeah.
programs and make them interactive in various ways.
Yeah.
And I think what's happened is I've managed to stay relevant by being curious and
Yeah.
creative and always
Absolutely.
asking questions and what can I do with this piece of tech?
Yeah.
Rather than just saying, give me the next project. It's what can
Hmm.
I do with it? And
Hmm.
so sometimes what happens is you run out of things to do in a company, so you move on.
Mm-hmm.
You
That
know,
is
and
true.
that experience has built up and built up to the point where when you look at the CV, I've worked at all sorts of places. I've worked at Microsoft Xbox, I've worked at the Royal Shakespeare Company, you
Yeah.
know, BBC, Sky. I'm at LNER now, one of the biggest rail companies in Britain.
Yeah.
You know, and that's because I have a breadth of experience that allows me to take that curiosity
Mm-hmm.
and to use it inside a business for business purposes. Because, you
Right.
know, if you're in a business working, you have to work for the business, you know,
Absolutely.
and for the good of the business. The business has to make money, it has to exist, it has to develop.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, and sometimes what happens is you do 3 or 4 years and your paths start to diverge, so you move on. But I always move on, I think, on the whole, before I get pushed. I also get very bored after 3 or 4 years, usually,
Mm-hmm.
and want a new environment, a new challenge.
Yeah.
And so what I've done is tried to harness all of those
Mm.
impulses, and it's led me to where I am. You know,
Yeah.
I can't quite believe it when I look back at it now.
I know. I mean, and also I can like sort of relate to what you're saying because I think being driven by curiosity is a lot more important to even, continue being interested in what you're
Yeah.
doing. And of course, you are working for the business, but at the end of the day, you are sort of like driven by curiosity and you're like treating every single day as, something new to learn, right?
Well, I'm a person who walks into a room, and if there's
Yeah.
an object on a table, I will pick it up and look at it.
Mm,
You know, what's this? Look underneath it, you know, and
mm,
look at the top and then put it back. And it's kind of like quietly over
yeah.
the years, I've developed that habit of thinking, what's this? How does it work?
Yeah.
Can I use it for anything interesting?
Yeah.
And I think in the future, and this is what I'm
Mm,
going to talk about at the conference, I think in the future, people who are curious will have an advantage.
mm-hmm.
I think people who are open minded will have an advantage, and people who have the ability to think philosophically will be at an advantage.
Mm,
Because I
okay.
think, you know, working in tech, a lot of the tech will be, you know, robot assisted.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the difficulty will go from coding and things. I don't think it'll replace humans totally,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, it will become a different kind of job. And I think the people who excel will be the people who look at it and go, but what more can I do with this?
Mm-hmm.
And that skill has come to me from being a painter and a fine artist. Other people, it might come from a tech course,
Mm-hmm.
but it is always, what more can I do with it?
Yeah.
You know, and it's that impulse, I think, that people really need to develop.
Yeah.
I think there are far too many people want to train for a job rather than be educated for a job.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also people don't understand the difference between training and education. Training is just about teaching you a process or a set of processes to do something mechanically. Education is about enlightenment and
Yeah.
expanding your worldview and your view of things. And I think people need to become much more educated about their jobs and work rather than trained.
Mm,
And I think those are the people that will make things. And if you look at, you know, the huge tech figures, you know, the Musks and the Zuckerbergs, they are all people who took a nascent technology and said, what can I do with this?
mm,
You know, they're not people who are brilliant programmers. They're not people who are brilliant testers. They're not people who are brilliant producers. They are people who say, what can I do with this? And they have made services and products that
yeah.
are, at the very least, interesting. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And this is only going to escalate.
Yeah.
And I think people right down businesses need to be like that. And I was thinking about this being a testing conference, obviously. My first exposure to a test bench was in 1993. We had a test bench for
Okay.
television.
Mm-hmm.
And we brought young kids, and I say young kids because I'm old, but actually at the time they were 18 to 20.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was a lot younger as well. But and they sat at these test benches and they tested. And I remember having a thing where I did my first game, and it worked beautifully. So I sent it to the test bench and it
Hmm.
failed immediately.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is the interesting thing. It made me realize that I subconsciously was somehow running the thing in a way that I knew would work because I'd programmed it. Whereas when somebody got to it blind with a script, it didn't work. And that event, I think, has stayed with me throughout this. And I'd say to, the test community that that is a common thing that I think, testing needs to become much more rigorous and much more intelligent and much more thoughtful about how people use things. And
It's
and
funny that you mentioned that. Just this morning, I was having a chat with another speaker from the conference, and she'll be talking more on like diversity in the workplace, but she just mentioned about neurodivergence and
Mm,
how testing processes can be adopted to sort of take that also into consideration because you're sort of creating these processes and you're creating software to for them to be used by people, right? So it's more
yeah,
about like inclusion, not just at workplace but also in your
exactly that.
software. Hmm.
To me, testing is part of customer experience.
Hmm.
It's not about testing it technically.
Yeah.
There's a place for testing technically because you have to make sure that things work.
Hmm.
But ultimately, testing should be about what happens if some kid wanders in, switches it on, and plays.
Hmm.
You know, and that kid isn't a normal kid. That's a kid who hits loads of buttons.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely that, the human side of it. And I think this goes back to what I just said earlier about philosophy, that
Mm.
you have to have I think you have to start thinking, okay, this is a bit wider. This is about people. This is about society. It's about inclusion. It's about diversity. And, it's diversity of thought. It's not just diversity in color or behavior, it's thought. It's diversity in background,
Yeah.
diversity in attitude.
Hmm.
And you've kind of got to replicate that somehow. And that's very difficult in a testing environment,
Mm.
because those things are psychological. And I wonder how many test setups actually test the psychology of things.
Do you like from your experience, like, do you think that there's like a lack of that understanding right now?
I think so, but I'd say my experience isn't as wide as it was because I've tended to
Mm.
sort of work less and less as an architect with testing, other than just to check scripts are okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think what the lack is, not the lack in the testing world. I think it's the recognition that the whole tech world has got so much bigger and more complex.
Mm-hmm.
So we are entering an era now where there's computation in everything. Your car, your phone, all of these things are computational and everything needs to be tested, not only as a device, but
Mm-hmm.
as a node on a massive network. I mean, I want to ask anybody listening, just think how many things in your home, just in your home, are connected. Are they connected to each other? Are they connected to the internet? I'd warrant dozens of things, right? So if just one home has got dozens of connections, what's your
Yeah.
village got? And when you're making something and when you're testing it and when you're thinking about how it's used, you've got that three-dimensionality to
Mm-hmm.
test as well, or to at least consider. And so
Mm-hmm.
not only have you got human behavior, but you've got all that connectivity, you've got the odd use cases, you know. I mean, yes, I understand the pressures and you can't test for everything, and this is a universe we're talking about. But I wonder how many people actually think of these things. And this is where I think the future's going for employment and all the stuff I'm going to talk about. I think there's going to be an increasing market for people who think like that.
Yeah.
Right, everything's
Especially in the
connected.
age of AI, isn't it? And
Well, this is it.
ethical use of it.
So they're not only connected, they're smart. They're
Mm.
making decisions for you.
Mm-hmm.
And there's 43 different things in your house
Mm-hmm.
making decisions for you. So how do you test that thing over there in the corner that's connected to these other things?
Mm-hmm.
Now that requires some real brain power to think through that, and you will work with an AI to work that out. But you will, as a human, will still have to look at that and go, this is the way.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a far cry from that test bench in the early 90s where people turned up, switched a game on, and just pressed buttons until they hit a
Yeah.
floor.
Yeah.
I mean, testing could be an incredibly rich career from that point of view.
True. True. And we've spoken a little bit about AI.
Mm,
I want to try and understand your perspective on, like, obviously, in the age of AI, we do know that tech landscape is like sort of evolving quite rapidly, right? Like every single day. But
yeah.
in your experience, what do you think have been like some of the biggest shifts that you have observed in the recent few years?
Well, I mean, I have to say, in my career, every 5 years or so, I've had to change what
Yeah.
I'm doing because the tech underneath has changed.
Hmm.
I think with the AI, it's more fundamental. When I speak at conferences about tech and about all of that sort of stuff, I sometimes say that, you know, humans got together to grow food to be able to feed each other 5,000, 10,000 years ago. We then had an industrial revolution that gave us machines that were powerful. So we created horsepower. Yeah.
Hmm.
And now we're entering an era where we are creating brain power. So
Hmm.
we've completed a remarkable shift in 10,000 years, but it's been speeding up and up and up.
Yeah.
And I think with AI coming, there's not an awful lot of actual artificial intelligence around, right? Most of it is machine learning
Hmm.
and stuff. So there are techniques within the set of AI, but it's not intelligence as we know it. We're a very long way away from having general AI that can actually autonomously think.
Yeah.
I know they like to say that it's close, but it's not really.
It's not.
They're just very, very smart, and there's a difference. And I think the big changes that are happening now are on the scale of it and the complexity of it. And that's mathematical complexity. So everything's connected to everything else.
Hmm.
And I think that's the change. We've always been thinking, for instance, in terms of developing digital products, of a
Hmm.
product. This is an app, this is a website, this is a whatever, this is a game. Now that product is mired in multiple connections. And you are instantly creating a node on a network,
Hmm.
which I think is a significant thing because it means your product suddenly
Yeah.
starts to become a service because it's connected to other things. And this is where I think work-wise at the moment, the big shift is happening. Things are moving from discrete products to being services. And that means continuously on. It means different payment models,
Hmm.
means different usage, different peaks, different stresses on the system, and
Yeah.
so on.
Wow, that is definitely quite interesting. And what do you think like about the job market these days? I mean, there are
Tough at the
obviously so
moment.
many
It's tough out
layoffs.
there.
Yeah, it is tough.
And will it
Because
get
you
better?
spoke about
Yeah,
resilience, right? So that is
yeah.
of obviously an important quality.
Well, I mean, in terms of resilience, what do I think? I mean, I've gone from job to job. I've been a contractor, I've been a permanent employee, I've had all those things.
Yeah.
And I've always managed to find work. And I think what's happening at the moment is a reassessment of what people or companies need. I don't
Mm,
think a lot of companies know what they need properly. I don't think they fully are. I don't think they are fully cognizant of the way to develop their services moving ahead yet. I think they're frightened by AI. They are told. I mean, I sat in a room the other day and I was just listening to all these old people like me, and they were all business people, and they were talking about AI this and AI that for
Yeah.
their businesses. And you're thinking, there's no need for AI there with what they're talking about. And it's
Hmm.
that the other. But what they're clearly being told is they're told it's important. They're told there's massive pressure on, and to
Hmm.
some extent you have to respond. So I think in terms of the job market, realistically you have to have some kind of experience of AI. I
Yeah.
think you have to be prepared to take day rate contracting in between things. I
Hmm.
think expecting a high paid, high powered permanent job,
Yeah.
uh, just earn what you can. I mean, I took teaching gigs because it paid the mortgage, while I was looking for other things. I
You
taught for
gotta do
six
what you
months.
gotta do, right?
You got to do what you got to do. And I think, we, I don't really want to bring this up, but immigration is an interesting metaphor because
Yeah.
actually the world that we're entering is so new that we are all immigrants in the new world of work.
Hmm.
And if you think of it like that, you've got to think what happens when somebody comes to a new country and they're an immigrant. They go and wash the cars, right? They'll clean your chimney for you. They'll whatever.
Hmm.
And over time, they earn a bit of money. Then they open a shop. Then they do this. Then they do that. And it's
Yeah.
a
I
way of
served
working.
coffee and cocktails when I first
Exactly.
came here.
That's exactly the point.
Yeah.
And I think we are all immigrants in the new world of work,
Hmm.
and there's no certainty anymore. And
Yeah.
also remember that when you take a job, it's a two-way contract.
Absolutely.
So you sign a contract saying, I will give you my services and you pay me that. That's a two-way thing. You shouldn't be grateful for them doing that. You should aim to do the best you can in the role, but you should understand it as a contract. And I think increasingly employment will become
Hmm.
modeled on business contracts.
Yeah.
And we might all end up as individual businesses, you
Hmm.
know, selling our skills to a range of people.
Yeah.
But if I got out of bed tomorrow and had to look for work, I would go online, I would search, I would phone people, and these are all the old things that we've always done,
Hmm.
but you have opportunity now to provide a showcase.
Yeah.
I would send them to my LinkedIn or I would send them to my website or my YouTube channel or whatever and go and record some stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
I don't know what else to say really. It's just brutal, isn't
It is. It
it?
is. And it's true. Like you gotta do what you gotta do, right?
Yeah.
Um, but honestly, Richard, like I mean, we're running out of time right now, but I
Oh,
have like so many more questions to ask you. But this podcast has been like amazing. I've loved having this conversation with you and definitely very excited to meet you at the conference as well. But
well, listen,
before
I'll
we,
be at the conference and obviously I've got my speaking slot, but I'll be
yeah,
around at least the day I'm speaking. I can't say whether I can be at both days,
yeah,
but certainly the day I'm speaking, I'll be there all day. And so if anybody wants to talk around that, I'll happily do that during the day.
absolutely. Yeah. And we always announce that in the beginning and at the end of
Yeah.
the speaking session anyway. But yeah, there's like a really nice networking area upstairs that
Oh,
people can
great. Okay.
uh, so yeah, all things good. And yeah, very excited to meet you, Richard. And yeah,
Likewise.
before we end the podcast today, is there anything else you want to say to our audience?
Um, don't let things stop you. I will say one thing about my background. When I was born and when I was young,
Yeah.
um, I was born in a two-room, small terraced house in a mining village with the whole family going back 200 years of coal miners. We were very poor. When I was young, we didn't have an inside toilet. We had an outside toilet and things like that. And
Mhm.
nothing stopped me doing what I'm doing because I've got the curiosity and I'm interested in things. And you have to be interested
Yeah.
in stuff, as my friend used to say. You know.
Richard, this has
And
been one of my most favorite podcasts right now.
thank you. But I am happy to talk to people, and if on the day you want to arrange a little group where a few people want to talk, more than happy to do it.
We could do like a nice panel discussion and then do like another recording. Yeah, it'll be fun.
It's entirely up to you guys, but as I say, I will be speaking about
Yeah.
my career resilience. But I'm just one example. I mean, I may be exceptional. I don't know, you know. But I just basically, if something bad happens, I cry, I sulk, I go to bed, I get up the next day and start again. And that's the only advice I can give to people.
Keep restarting.
Yeah, just start again the next day once you've had your cry, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Perfect,
anyway,
Richard. On this note, I'm going to end the podcast. But yes, again, very excited to meet you at the conference. Perfect. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, by the way.
oh, that's all right. I've enjoyed it. I well, as you can tell, I enjoy speaking. So,
Hmm. Well, you are a speaker, so that should
well, that's
definitely be an
true.
advantage.
Yeah. Well, I'm an ex-teacher as well, so we're used to speaking in public.
Yeah,
You know, but no, that's been great. Thank you.
perfect. Thank you, Richard. And yeah, let's stay in touch.
Well, you know where I am, so drop me a line.